Indictment. State of Tennessee, Davidson County. The grand jurors of Davidson County, Tennessee, duly impaneled and sworn upon their oath, present that Caleb Josiah Cannon, on the 23rd day of May 2014, in Davidson County, Tennessee, and before the finding of this indictment, unlawfully, intentionally, and with premeditation did kill Nichole Burgess in violation of Tennessee Code Annotated Section 39-13-202 and against the peace and dignity of the state of Tennessee. Signed by Glenn R. Funk, District Attorney General, 20th Judicial District. Also signed by the foreperson of the Davidson County Grand Jury.
To the charge of first-degree murder, how does your client plead?
Your Honor, my client maintains his plea of not guilty.
All right. Statement here to make a mistake. Yes, Your Honor. Okay.
2:17 p.m. on Friday, May 23rd of 2014. Ms. Nichole Burgess was never seen or heard from again after this date and time. The state's proof will show that's because the defendant, Caleb Cannon, murdered her. Ms. Burgess was in a good place in her life. She was a model and an artist. She had family, friends, and a boyfriend who loved her. Ms. Burgess had plans to move in with her boyfriend the following week, the week following her murder. Tiernan, her son who she had with the defendant, was moving in with him as well. Tiernan was 10 years old at the time of her murder. Ms. Burgess and the defendant had a strained relationship. They were never married, and they separated around the time that Tiernan was 1 year old. The judicial system awarded Ms. Burgess primary custody of Tiernan. The defendant was allowed to see him every other weekend, but the defendant was never happy with this arrangement. He was particularly unhappy about how often Ms. Burgess and Tiernan moved. He finally had enough, so he took steps to do something about it. He wanted to remove Tiernan from his mother's custody, so he removed his mother, Ms. Nichole Burgess, from the equation. And he did that by committing first-degree premeditated murder. You'll hear from many witnesses in this case who will prove to you that that happened beyond a reasonable doubt. One such witness is TBI Special Agent Andrew Valley. He's an expert in the field of communications records. He will tell you the defendant and Ms. Burgess were at her house at the time of her murder. After she sent her last text message at 2:17 p.m., her phone was then either turned off or destroyed. The defendant's cell phone records also tell us that he remained at Ms. Burgess's house for an hour after her murder. Because of this, he was late picking Tiernan up from school. And you'll hear from Tiernan that it was his father's weekend to take him for custody purposes. And Tiernan will tell you about the many significant occurrences of that Friday afternoon and evening of his mother's murder. First, he was late picking him up from school, which was unusual. Then, instead of doing what they always do when he got picked up from school, which is driving back to East Tennessee where the defendant lived, they went back to Ms. Burgess's house, where they went inside and stayed for several hours. You'll hear from Tiernan and other witnesses that this was not normal. The defendant did not spend time at Ms. Burgess's house when she was present, and certainly not when she was not there. Tiernan asked his father where his mother was. Her car was still in the driveway or in the area in front of the house, and inside her car was her purse, her wallet, essentially, containing her driver's license, her Social Security card, and her means of payments. The defendant told Tiernan that she left with her friend, Stevie. Tiernan will tell you that that struck him as extremely odd because he knew that Stevie did not have a driver's license and she didn't drive, and whenever Miss Burgess and Stevie would go out together, his mother would drive. You'll hear from Stevie, whose full name is Stephanie Blaney, and she will tell you that what the defendant told Tiernan was a lie, that they did not go out together that afternoon. The defendant also told Tiernan, along with Tiernan's neighborhood friend who you'll hear from, Dylan Dalton, that they could not use the restroom, the one bathroom that was inside the house, what you'll learn to be a significant fact. The defendant and Tiernan stayed at the house, at Ms. Burgess's house, for several hours until it got dark. And once it got dark, the defendant told Tiernan to wait inside the car, where the defendant began loading things inside of the trunk before driving on to East Tennessee. Now, Ms. Blaney, again Stevie, will testify that Ms. Burgess was her best friend, and she is the one who was texting her right before she was killed. She became concerned because Miss Burgess would not respond to her text messages or calls, and she went over to her house the next day on Saturday, May 24th. Miss Burgess's car was still there, and inside her car was still her wallet containing her driver's license, social security number, and means of payment. She could also hear her beloved dogs barking inside the house. Again, what you'll learn to be a significant fact, because you'll hear from multiple witnesses that Miss Burgess loved those dogs and would not have gone anywhere leaving them uncared for. You'll hear from James McCavanagh. He was a neighbor who lived next door to Miss Burgess in a duplex. They shared a duplex. And he will tell you about two suspicious people he saw at Miss Burgess's house late that Saturday night, appearing to carry out what looked to be dead weight in a large duffel bag in complete darkness. You'll hear from Kim Himes. She's an ex-girlfriend of the defendants, and she came forward when she heard about Miss Burgess's murder. And she came forward because the defendant and Miss Burgess did not have an amicable relationship. The defendant would oftentimes tell Miss Himes that one day Miss Burgess would just disappear and that Tiernan would be his alibi. Ms. Himes will tell you the defendant got particularly angry with Miss Burgess because, again, she would move, and she'd move a lot with Tiernan. Something, again, that was about to happen right before her murder, and you'll hear the testimony from Jason Henry, her boyfriend at the time, about this. You'll also hear that Miss Burgess's body has never been found, so the defendant did, in fact, make her disappear. You'll hear from 3 experts in the field of training canines and human remains detection. These canine handlers and their dogs were called out by the police to Miss Burgess's home, and it became obvious that it was a crime scene. The dogs alerted to the scent of decomposing human remains both in Miss Burgess's bedroom and in the home's one bathroom, specifically in the bathtub. One of these dogs was also asked to walk around 3 cars, one of which was the defendant's, and the dog alerted again to the smell of human decay in the trunk of that car. This is just a sampling of what you're going to hear during this trial. And the testimony from all of the state's witnesses will prove to you and lead you to the undeniable conclusion that the defendant, Caleb Cannon, is guilty of first-degree premeditated murder.
There's no murder until you say there is. As the state indicated, there is no body, there is no cause of death, there is no manner of death, and they will not be able to prove it. Some of what they say is true. Some of what they say, in fact, was said by my client to the police. Yes, he was at her duplex. Yes, he was there to pick up his son. Yes, he went back to the house afterwards so his son could play and let the traffic die down on I-40 on Memorial Day weekend Friday. And yes, he then drove back with his son to Anderson County. And yes, there was calls during the weekend where people could not find Nikki. You'll hear testimony in this case about Miss Burgess and about her life. And you will hear what the police did and did not do to investigate her life, her friends, her associates. You will hear that this case was a missing persons case for 48 hours. And within 72 hours of the time Miss Burgess is reported missing, within 72 hours, before they even search her home, they conclude that my client was involved in her disappearance. You will hear that they spend the next 17 months of this investigation trying to whittle this square peg into their round hole theory. An example, you will hear from human remain detection dogs who hit on the odor of human remains. And you will hear that they hit in the bathroom of Miss Burgess. You'll also hear there's hair in the bathtub. There's a bloody diaphragm in the trash can in this very small bathroom. So if they want you to believe that those dogs mean that she's dead, not that they're hitting on human remains of blood and hair. That's the example of them trying to whittle this square peg into a round hole. Please listen carefully during the entire course of this trial, because at the end of this case, you will be shocked at the tunnel vision of the Metro Police Department, and you will render the only verdict possible in this case, a verdict of not guilty.
All right, who's your first witness?
Stephanie Blaney.